Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called How to Overcome the Effects of Early Abandonment Trauma, Addressing the Four Original Wounds in a Journey Towards Wellness for Empaths, Sensitives, and Intuitives. My name is Stephen Dyna. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really blessed to be with you here, getting to explore into very core material that can impact all of us. These are more universal wound patterns that really all of us, particularly those who are more sensitive, go through as part of the whole incarnational journey. So it's not so much about our specific biography, it's really about our journey as souls and how do we navigate that in a way that keeps us connected to the fullness of who we are. So we're going to get to explore this with a really fascinating pioneer and teacher in this arena. His name is Dave Markowitz. He's an author and intuitive healing facilitator. He's taught for Shift before, and he's got, I think, a particularly nuanced and deep understanding that's very relevant for those of us who are more sensitive and empathetic. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us again at Shift.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, we're going to dive in, and I do want to let everyone know up front that we are going to have a brand new program with Dave that goes further in this direction. It's called Healing the Four Original Wounds. So if you get sparked in the next hour, we're going to have an opportunity to go much deeper. So Dave, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your particular journey around these four original wounds, really coming to see why they're so foundational, how they affected your own life, and why we really need to have more collective understanding about how to address them as a community.
Yeah, so I grew up the son of a pharmacist. I really took a lot of pills for all my aches and pains, and the pain would go away. And there was really no reason to question those. And I think that's not uncommon that we learn to do this. And eventually I started seeing that this wasn't really addressing the cause. So everything I learned after that, everything from massage therapy to Chinese energetic medicine to therapeutic touch, et cetera, there's a long list. I really always want to know what was the underlying cause. And it really made sense if we didn't get to that cause, how could we really have healing? I mean, how could it be a deep, permanent healing if we're not addressing the root level, right? So a lot of things, energy work, even some surgeries are really addressing the symptoms only. And there's value to that, of course. We want to feel better. But I started really seeing the value of determining the underlying cause and working with that very directly. And in fact, really just kind of refocusing from looking at symptoms as something, we learn as something to fight, something to get rid of. And what I learned eventually was, energetically speaking, that actually makes it worse because we're trying to get rid of something. There's no acceptance in that. Acceptance doesn't mean like I accept this and I can't do anything about it. It means I accept that this is what is, it's the end result of what was, and there's something we can do about it. So by going deeper into that, it became really clear that our emotional body, in my experience at least, I can't claim the truth for everyone, that the emotional body was the root. So, for example, two people working at a desk all day long, one person doesn't like their job, one person does. They're both in similar shape, condition, but their mindset really made their experience. So their emotional body, how they think about what they feel about what they were doing had a big effect. So some would get carpal tunnel, for example, and some would be totally fine. So it made it really clear that there was something very individual and individuated underneath all of the symptoms. So when we stop looking at symptoms as something to fight, or rather something to learn from, something to actually embrace, because again, fighting actually makes it worse. We've all heard that phrase, what you resist persists. Also, what we judge gets worse. So what I found was actually leaning into and listening to the symptoms was much more empowering and gave it at least a chance of, a permanent healing by working on the emotional body. And, it sort of, I don't know, it just made so much sense to me. And I've been working with the emotional body and our thought patterns and everything associated with that for now, gosh, well over a decade. Even though I've been doing all this healing work for almost 3 decades now. And each time I'm doing this, it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I started seeing, well, isn't it possible that separation from source and the emotions associated with that can be even a deeper root level than all the things that we've experienced later on in life? So it was really kind of going back and back and back towards the original wounding. And when I started diving into that through a lot of meditation and working with a lot of people, I was able to see that there are at least four original wounds, and each one creates a void or a pain. And then we just often spend our lives, if it creates a void, for example, we spend our lives trying to fill that void with all things that don't really fill it. It's like, well, what actually fills it? How do we really work with this directly? And what I was seeing was the emotions associated with separation from source, separation from family. We'll go deeper into that. Each one of these creates specific wounds. And then those wounds aren't healed. And then we go through life trying to fix them, or the problems show up in more ways, right? So, for example, if there's an abandonment wound at birth, which I think there is for everyone, how does that show up, and how does that play into our relationships? Do we get into relationships just so we don't feel abandoned, or do we not break up with someone even though it's not working because we're afraid of that energy, afraid of feeling that abandonment energy again? So I don't know, it just became like this giant jigsaw puzzle, and all these pieces were filling themselves in for me, and it narrowed it down to these original four wounds, which I think everyone experiences and has, detrimental effects on us later on, and we wonder why we're not getting better. Part of it is not fighting the symptoms anymore, but actually looking at them and understanding this. I think we take it even further, is recognizing that everything happens for a reason. I know we hear that and we kind of say it's a cliche, and sometimes cliches are true, so I guess we can say it anyway. But to look at things from that perspective gave me a lot of peace, even around these painful wounds. In other words, if we believe a creator knows what he, she, it, they are doing, then it's impossible for that creator to make a mistake. So anytime we say something shouldn't be, well, clearly that's our own minds getting in the way. So if it is, then it should be, right? And it is meant to be, right? And that actually gave me a lot of peace internally, and didn't make all the pain go away for different things that I was dealing with, but it gave a deeper understanding. And from that perspective, we just stopped fighting life. And I think, and maybe other people that are just fighting life all the time. They're always fighting the good fight. And it doesn't mean to not fight for what you want, of course, but maybe challenge that and go even deeper and say, how much of that is what you want versus how much your soul wants to experience and express through you.
Mm.
So a lot of potential here, and I'm happy to go into any of those in more depth. Okay.
Well, I really appreciate the combination of the deep embrace and acceptance of what is, and the sort of acknowledgement that there's these core painful traumas that have their divine purpose, that are part of the incarnational journey for all of us, and that is going to, unless we really address those, it's going to influence things and tilt things in directions that may not serve our current vision for life. So why don't we give an overview of the four wounds and how you see them showing up, and then we can start to talk a little bit about how to address them.
Sure, happy to do that. And I love that phrase, a divine purpose, right? If we really breathe into that for a moment, how awesome is that, right? Everything has divine purpose, including ourselves, including our conversation right now. Someone, at least one person, needs to hear this, and that's why we're here. Great, let's celebrate that, right? So original wounds. I'd like to take people on maybe a brief journey if I can. So if you want to close your eyes, great. If you don't want to, that's fine. But just imagine for a moment, you're in this, I call it energetic soup. You're a soul, no physical body, and you're in this space of with other spirit, with the creator, maybe with ancestors. And this is, sort of our beginnings, right? It's the soul journey starting here. And at some point, we realize that we need to learn things, and we need to learn those things through experience. So we decide to incarnate into a physical body. And we get, into who would become our mom, of course. And during those 9 months in utero, typically, not for everyone, unfortunately, but typically it's a nice, warm, loving place to be. Not that different from where you were prior with source energy. And then around 9 months, give or take, we know it's time to leave that warm, loving environment. And we come out, and what does that feel like? How many babies come out really calm and centered and zen? Not too many. right? Because we're inundated with light, with sound, with vibration in a very different way. And all we want is to feel that sense of connection that we had with our mom and that sense of connection that we had even prior to conception. And then all of a sudden we feel separate. Tremendous abandonment wounding. That's a good reason of why babies cry so much. Now, granted, that baby might need food or changing, later on, of course, but that fear of being alone, of being separate, is so intense. And then with parents, well-meaning, of course, do things to try to minimize that discomfort. But the reality, if you think about it, as soon as that umbilical cord is cut, we're alone. Now, some cultures hold those babies a little bit longer, but eventually those babies are put, in a crib or just started to getting ignored. But what I found was this is the first original wound. And you can see it's by design, right? Back to the divine purpose. And the divine purpose, I'll just do a quick side note here, is we learn through duality and contrast. We don't learn much as souls alone. We learn through duality and contrast in the physical world. So what better way to teach oneness by teaching separation first, right? Kind of makes sense. It's a really intense and horribly sad and very painful separation that I think we spend the rest of our lives trying to cope with and try to heal without even knowing that it's there. So this physical separation creates a craving for physical connection, right? Each of these wounds has a realm and creates specific wounding that we then try to fill. So, and what I've seen, and I think a lot of us have witnessed this as well, a lot of times healing is done just through spiritual means or just through energetic means, and that's fine. But physically, we can't forget any of these realms. It's super important to take care of the physical as well. Eating right, exercise, and not just eating high vibration foods, but having a good mindset while you're eating them. It's so important, right? If you're eating while you're stressed, how much nutrition are you really going to take in? So this physical separation creates the need for physical reconnection, right? And it's beautiful if you think about it. And it's really painful. And so is life. Life is painful, right? And again, we learn through that pain. How many people do you know that waited to get a diagnosis of something to make a change? And oftentimes it's dramatic change, and that creates a lot of healing as well. But we don't typically, we'll do those things that feel good in the moment, right? Not really recognizing long-term consequences. And we have to start looking at the physical body a lot more. 2/3 of this country at least is overweight. About half of those are considered obese. So we're not being healthy. And this is not fat shaming at all. I hope no one really sees it as that. It's really just a recognition that when you're overweight, your heart has to work a lot harder. And it leads to pain and illness and disease, right? So, let's look at these things from loving, compassionate eyes rather than saying, oh, you're overweight, you're wrong, you're bad. That's nothing to do with that. It's like, no. What's the actual craving that's missing that is creating those situations? That's just one example, right? So that's original wound number one.
So there's a connection you've seen that between this sort of like primal separation and the absence or the hunger that gets for the connection, then that sort of like sometimes the eating perhaps can become like a way to like help to numb or fill in that energetic hole, it sounds like.
Definitely as part of it. Think about what happens to many babies, right? When they're crying, they're given a pacifier, which by nature and description of the actual word, what does it do? It doesn't appease the emotional wound, it pacifies the pain, and it teaches oral satisfaction, right? How many addictions are hand to mouth? Smoking, drinking, overeating, etc. Right? It's recreating this original moment where we learned that that's the way to deal with pain. And even worse, perhaps, is it teaches us to actually judge that pain. Right? Babies don't come out saying, "Oh, I'm not going to cry because it's not cool." Right? They're like, "Wow," right? But as adults, and we take these beliefs on it from family of origin, obviously, and society, culture, et cetera, tend to magnify it and cement it. Really, that makes us afraid of these raw emotions. So, an epidemic of depression. Well, what I have found is Certainly, there can be numerous reasons, but what I found quite often is that it's because someone hasn't processed their grief. Not that they have sadness or more or less sadness than others, but they haven't processed the sadness. And that creates that stagnation. Difficult to work with, but impossible to heal if we don't recognize these formative layers that, you know, when we're really young. And that correlation that you're talking about, absolutely, um, it's always at the root. So we need to address those with, again, more compassion, more
Mm,
love, and take proper steps, but also not from a fear place that sometimes makes things worse. Right. So we have to recognize and embrace all of these parts of ourselves. We're typically taught to fear and then push into the shadows, the fear, anger, and grief.
mhm,
Thus, that becomes shadow. So, good shadow work is actually revealing those parts that we have repressed. And people heal a lot of really intense pains and illness by just doing this work with me. And of course, we'll do it in the course, getting in touch with the things that we've repressed.
mhm,
And it just kind of makes sense. If that's the causative layer, let's work with that. Let's free
mm,
ourselves up around that, and then we can truly be free.
mm. So first step, really see it and then embrace the fact that it's just there and all the constellation of emotions around it.
Totally. Yeah. We can't fight these things anymore. It's like fighting life. Like you're fighting yourself, you're fighting life,
Hmm.
and it just doesn't work.
Mhm,
It actually makes us very unhealthy.
mm. So let's go into the second core wound.
Okay. The second one, I think all the people listening are going to relate to, maybe even more acutely, perhaps. We'll see. Is the separation, or actually more accurately, the perceived separation from source energy itself. So when we're a soul, pre-birth, we're very connected. We're often very connected still in utero, and we're also still very connected, typically when we're born, to that source energy. But as time goes on, we experience various woundings and distrusts and forms of abandonment, etc. And the ego begins to form. And the ego is the part that wants to protect us. It's the part that says, you opened up your heart once, you got spanked, didn't feel good. I'm not going to let that happen again. So we perceive that we're separating from a source energy, which again is a horribly painful abandonment, right? I can speak for my own self. I grew up in a very traditional religion, not super religious, but at some point, there was this disbelief that what they called God even existed. And that was part of my journey also, right? That was the adult separation, perhaps the continuation from the childhood separation. I said, no, there's nothing else out there. I'm a scientist, damn it. I'm using my left brain or else. But that's perceived separation has a purpose. And like you said, divine purpose as well. That creates a spiritual longing. And that longing shows up in prayer, church, temple, whatever it is, walking the Camino. It creates a need and desire to reconnect with spirit, right? Alongside that need to reconnect with the physical body or the physical sensations of touch, etc. So it's just as important. Some might say more or less, but it's vital for our health, for our happiness, and our healing to reconnect with that aspect of ourselves that I call source energy. It goes by many different names, the creator, etc. But knowing that exists also goes back to our earlier point. There's a rhyme and reason for everything that seems crazy on the planet and within us. And when we connect to that energy, we get that sense of connection, of course. We get that sense of belonging. We don't feel as alone. And it's one of the reasons we're always seeking, not always, but quite often, even if subconsciously, seeking that reconnection with the spiritual realm.
Mm,
And that can look different for different people. And none of those are wrong, obviously. Whatever your path is, I totally embrace it. And I hope you do as well. But the void is created as the ego begins to form. It creates more and more separation. So again, you can see there's more rhyme and reason to this. And because we learn through duality and contrast, we have to learn about separation to appreciate reconnection. And then when you do have those moments reconnected to source, I mean, I can speak for myself. It's just totally freeing. I know exactly what to do. I knew when to apply to shift network, right? Because if I applied before I was really ready, or my mind, my ego said I was ready, it would not have worked, right? It's the part that says, okay, Dave, you're going to teach this course and it's going to be feature these modules and it's going to have these amazing benefits for everyone that shows up. Like I, Dave, cannot take credit for that. I am not that smart, right? But I'm intuitive and I can hear what people need in the moment. So it's one of the reasons why the course is so powerful. Of course, there's, material to be covered, but I'm also intuiting how best to explain it, how best to take people through specific exercises. And sometimes I hear new exercises that I've never heard of before in the moment because I'm being totally present and listening to the needs of whoever I'm working with.
Hmm. So that's a great example of as the healed version of the working with that the separation from spirit. What often shows up in terms of symptoms of the unhealed wound for people?
Typically, a really intense longing, but we don't even know what that longing is. And it can create a number of different symptoms in the body, like energetic blockages or energetic blockages. There's not always a very specific correlation, but in this case, a sense of aloneness, depression, isolation, for example. I mean, if you're not feeling connected, it's going to be really painful. And I think that can actually, negatively affect everything else you're dealing with. So even something that might not be related to that is exacerbated by that because there's lack of trust in the plan, lack of trust in the whole process of life, right? So that creates a lot of fear, right? So fear-based illnesses, things that create insular existence in your body, right? Very tight, right? Tight muscles, a very minor example of that, but living very kind of, looking out for people. Now, I'll just share briefly. Years back, I was working with someone and he presented with a diagnosis of MS. Of course, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't treat MS. And before even knowing his story, I did an intuitive read. And what I saw very clearly was him as a very young child cowering in like the corner of his bedroom and looking out like, what's going to happen? And then shared what I saw with him. And he said, yeah, my mother used to hit me from behind. So I never knew when it was going to happen. So he spent his whole childhood in this place of horrible fear. Obviously affects your nervous system, creates tight muscles. Years later, he's diagnosed with MS, right? So that requires a sort of reworking and rewiring of the nervous system. So what I've seen is if you're connected with source, you don't really have that fear anymore, right? So it's part of the healing process is to not just heal the wound specifically, but to reconnect with source. I guess they're kind of the same thing. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Okay.
Go on to the third wound.
All right. Okay. All right. So the third wound is emotional. So what I've noticed, and maybe parents can, I'm not parents, so I can't speak from that perspective, but I was and often still am a kid, so I can speak to that point. When we're kids, we're unconditional love. Like babies come out and we're just loving. We want to love everyone, everything. And I think adults can feel that. One of the reasons people love babies so much because they're just a bundle of love. It's like being with a puppy. Who doesn't love that? Right. But what happens is over time, that unconditional love that we are and that unconditional love that we want reflected back and often do get reflected back, certainly in the first few months, becomes more conditional. Meaning if we do this, we get love. If we don't do that, we don't get love, etc. So it becomes transactional. And that's an emotional wound, a very painful one. And it creates these boundaries and walls around the heart, right? I kind of picture them as like this, like let's just say your heart, and you've got this wall being formed all around it. And you're wondering why in life you can't really connect with people. A lot of times we have to break down that wall to have access to that heart. But the pain of going from being unconditionally loved, whether it's for a few months or more, hopefully it's more, right? Into that pain of being told what to do all the time. So there's a terrible phrase, to use the word once again, the terrible twos. We hear this a lot. It's like a thing in Western culture. And it's when babies begin to express themselves and begin to say no. Why? Because they're maybe tired of being told what to do. Who likes being told what to do? I don't think anyone does, right? I think we want to be supported in finding our own truth, right? Of course. But what happens is that lack of unconditional love grows, and that creates emotional voids and wounding that, of course, will later affect us in life. So the third original wound is emotional separation. We're not feeling connected. We're not feeling we can trust people. It leads to basically living this inauthentic life, which I think a lot of us can relate to, at least understand, not really living our truth. And that's really painful. In fact, a lot of, again, major pain and illness that I've worked with is really just from not following one's truth. And because, think about that. You have this truth that's inside you. It's wonderful. It's booming, it's beaming, it's light. And then we have all this fear around it. How could that possibly be helpful or healthy to our full expression or to our health in general? So that emotional wound is really powerful as well.
Super helpful. And you want to do the fourth one now?
Sure. So the fourth one is a little bit different, but also very tied in with the prior. Because of the conditions that most of us go through, where we're being told what to do, where we're learning about transactional love, we create a false identity, right? Some people call it the ego, false self, inauthentic being, etc. And it's based around doing things to get love. And, for example, a small kid who is really good at piano, for example, they play piano and everyone goes, yay, here's our baby playing piano, how wonderful. And then they stop playing piano and all of a sudden they don't feel as wonderful anymore. That's really painful. That creates an inauthentic way of living. And it creates a need for self-discovery and self-creation because we've basically created ourselves as kids in the image of everyone else's desires of who we need or who they think we need to be. Right. So we're basically living in an inauthentic life at that point. And we hear this whether we're 30 or 80, at some point we wake up to the point, wow, I've been chasing X, whatever it is, for so long. And even if I've achieved it, I'm not feeling happy. Or I'm just still trying to achieve whatever that illusion of self is trying to create and recreate and recreate. And how does that affect our body? Well, of course, it closes the heart. How can we be free to love if we're not even sure of who we are? It's sort of like empty nest syndrome, where people don't know who they are after their kids leave. Well, sometimes it doesn't even need that as an impetus. We follow everyone else's ideas of who we should be, right? So, for example, my dad said he was again pharmacist, and he owned a couple of stores, and he did pretty well. And he said, just go into pharmacy, and I'll give you. He called it his empire. I think it was kind of goofing, but he said, I'll give you the empire. Just go to school. And I looked at him, and I looked at the store, and I said, I appreciate that it works for you, but I cannot see myself doing this. I knew early on I didn't want to be who he wanted me to be. And so I rebelled, right? I had hair down on my butt. I played really loud, really fast music, right? Everyone, teenagers typically rebel. Well, how much of that is built up rebellion from even the single digits years of trying to be and, trying to get love through our being, and it's just not working. So again, we create this false sense of self, and that creates a lot of problems in the body as well. So the fourth wound, healing that is recreating the self from a place of openness and surrender, right? Because sometimes people say, I don't know who I'll be if I'm not who I've been. And I say, great. Even though they're scared about that, I say, great. Let's let that information be filled in from the soul level. What is really here looking to express through you? How are you meant to show up in the world now? It doesn't make anything that anyone's done in the past wrong. It makes those things more of a springboard, a learning thing, again, through duality and contrast, right? It makes so much sense to me that we begin to embrace this duality and contrast, not fight it. I know a lot of people are trying to get out of non-dual, trying to go into non-duality thinking or non-duality living. And that's great if that's your thing, right? But what I've also seen with that is it leads to living up here. It's just a spiritual connection. Like we said before, what about the physical? What about the emotional? And this last original one, what about this need for self-discovery and self-creation? How important is it for us to follow our soul's guidance? And we wake up to that typically when we get frustrated with life. And I'm inviting people to wake up to it even sooner. Now, you might be frustrated already. Great. Right. It sounds weird to say great that you're frustrated, right? But again, through duality and contrast, let's embrace it, right? Because it's showing you what doesn't work for you anymore. Just like symptoms are messages that show you what doesn't work anymore. Fighting them doesn't work. What is the symptom trying to teach you? Whether it's a back pain or a growth, whatever it might be. If we really lean into that, I believe everyone can be their own medical and intuitive if we get our mind's ideas out of the way and just feel in and say, okay, what's going on here? Now, of course, it takes practice. It's not like, okay, I'm a medical intuitive, snap of the finger. It'd be nice if it was, sure. I studied for years to figure this out. But the thing that made it work was surrendering my ideas. So even working with someone, they present with X, Y, and Z symptom, whatever it is, my mind can say, oh, okay, well, that's because of this, this, and this. The deeper invitation is to say, well, what if it isn't? What if that's wrong? Or what if it's not the complete picture? So using intuitive means figuring out or allowing the truth to emerge, then we can actually befriend those symptoms, which is a big part of the healing as well. So befriending all the symptoms that happen from these original wounds. And I think part of that, recognizing these original wounds, is recognizing that there is a time and a place and a purpose, and everything has a rhyme and reason. As Shakespeare said, though this be madness, there is method to it. So that's my invitation for everyone listening, is to open to the possibility that even things that are just really, really painful are here for a reason, and to determine what that reason is for you as an individual is your key to freedom.
I really appreciate that. And so this like deep acceptance of the wound and all the constellation of symptoms around is part of it. But is there also a role for releasing it too? So it's like you're accepting what is, but also are you working to transform it, elevate it? Let me share a little bit about how you can both embrace and transform at the same time, if you will.
Yeah, that's the perfect word, transform, right? We understand that the energy, there's a certain amount of energy. It can't be created or destroyed, but only transformed. So if we have a blockage, typically it's from a lack of love, a lack of acceptance, fighting life, etc. Certainly it can be traced to the visual wounds, but we'll keep it general for now. By leaning into and allowing what's there, it actually begins transformation. I give my favorite analogy. Let's say you're making a big bowl of soup and you take a taste and it's missing something. And you put in, let's just say, a hot pepper. When you put that hot pepper in, it doesn't just change that area that the pepper went into, it permeates the whole bowl of soup. So by adding one even small thing, especially like a really hot pepper, right? By even adding one small thing, it has potential to transform everything that it's even remotely in touch with. What we typically do is add confusion, frustration, anxiety, even anger at our bowls of soup, aka our symptoms. What I've found is that if we can lean into the symptoms from a place of curiosity, not only can we get answers, but the whole energy that we're using of compassion, unconditional love, even acceptance, that actually has a transformative effect. So we'll do this in the course many times because a lot of these things are going to come up. And the transformation happens, it almost seems miraculous, but it might kind of make sense because you're adding a higher vibration to a lower vibration. And the lower vibration is now being raised to that higher vibration, kind of like that spice, for example, or in that example. So when we add love to anything, I mean, we kind of know this already to some degree, right? If you're in the presence of a practitioner who is very loving, open, and compassionate, of course you're going to feel better right away. But if you're in the presence of someone who's saying, "Oh gosh, wow, you're a mess," and I've heard things like this from my clients who've gone to medical doctors, and it's not to disrespect medical doctors. I totally have respect for them. I even have lots of respect for Western medicine. People are surprised to hear that, but again, there's a rhyme and reason for everything. So let's use it if we need it, use your medications if you need it, and work on the emotional and energetic aspects as well. So when we're adding a high vibration, we can begin the transformation process. Granted, it does take longer, right? But typically people can begin to feel even this much better in a pretty short period of time. And to me, that's a good indication that we're going in the right direction. So with repeated actions of that, and the other part of that is I briefly mentioned, but I'll just put it in different words. Being in a sacred container is vital for healing. If you didn't need that, and if you could do it on your own, you wouldn't be listening right now to find out how to heal. And
Mhm.
I work with a lot of really intelligent people, a lot of people that know the steps, that have all the tools, but do they do them? Not always, right? Why? We need support. We need that connection that we spoke about earlier. We need to feel safe in any given environment. So when I'm working with someone, I'm really in a place of presence and unconditional love for anything they share. People often share things with me that they've never shared before. And they typically get very emotional, and I will welcome it. I am, as the phrase goes, I am here for it. I welcome it. I don't fight it. I don't even fight skepticism anymore because I recognize what it's really about, right? It's fear based, and that's okay. Let's embrace the fear, right? So when
Mhm.
you're embracing the fear, you're embracing the symptoms, you're embracing the energy that created it, it actually could begin a transformation. So it's a little different than we typically learn, but you know, I can't argue with what I've seen to be so effective.
Mhm. I love the way you're so all-encompassing in your embrace of what is. So, Dave, I know you want to take us on an experiential to really ground some of what you're talking about in
Yeah,
understanding our own four original wounds and how those can be embraced. So let's do that now.
sure. I'd love to do that. Thank you. So I'm going to ask everyone who's listening to just focus on the breath. I'll explain what I mean and why. We're often told, take a deep breath. And there's a little bit of resistance to what is by changing it to be different than it is. Hope said that clearly, right? So if someone says, take a deep breath, it's not actually embracing what's there. It's trying to change what's there. And uh, in typical situations like that, there's a bit of a judgment. I'm breathing too shallow. That's wrong. That's bad. So now I have to change it. And we know this because how many times have we been told to take a deep breath? And then 30 seconds later, we're back to shallow breathing. So, in a similar kind of way of loving what is, I invite you to even embrace your shallow breath. So, I'm going to ask you to just practice noticing that breath without making it wrong, without making a story about it, without any judgments whatsoever. Just kind of breathe and just let it be. And your mind, of course, is going to drift. Your mind doesn't want you to heal. Your ego is your built in opponent. Don't fight that either, because you fight that, it will win every time. So actually embrace the voice that says, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is it going to work? Do I need to sign up for this course? All of the questions, just embrace them all. Practice again, staying present to the breath, letting it be as it is. You're just witnessing and feeling, again, not changing anything. And if you need words, sure, use whatever form of, isn't that interesting? That feels right to you. Isn't that interesting that my breath is shallow? If that's what you're noticing, there's no judgments in, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'm breathing shallow. And most of us are breathing shallow most of the time. Part of that is because we don't feel safe in the world. We're in at least a minimal, if not major amount of fight or flight, often from the first moments of birth. If you take that on, then there's a reason that you're breathing shallow if you are. You don't need to make it wrong. It's part of the plan. We can't appreciate deep breath without understanding and appreciating shallow breath. If you notice yourself nodding off, just observe that as well. Isn't that interesting? I nodded off for a moment. No judgments necessary, right? How self critical are most of us so much of the time? Not helpful. I invite you as well to expand that awareness from the breath, but as opposed to forcing it, I want you to allow it. Trust that in this moment, whether you're listening live or on recording, Source knows who you are. And every time you say yes, it says yes as well. So say yes to an expanded awareness. Be open to feeling, seeing, sensing, hearing, whatever your strength might be. What is it that's going on in my life that is related to one or all of the original wounds? And let yourself be guided. Maybe you get guided to your neck. Maybe there's some pain there. And practice again, just noticing it. You can say thank you for the information, gratitude, very high vibration. And maybe there's pain all over your body. You don't know where to focus. See if you can allow that not knowing as well, because needing to know actually creates blockages to knowing. Trust that you're being held and guided in this moment. Just by you showing up here, universe is also saying yes. Take advantage of the massive amount of group energy that's being generated in this call. We're all here seeking. How wonderful is that? Let yourself be in the not knowing. As soon as you say, I don't know, the universe says, oh, now I can fill in the blanks. Just do your best. There's no right or wrong here. You may be seeing something from when you were very young. You may just have an emotional reaction. Let those be there as well. Don't fight them. They're showing up for your benefit. They're showing up to show you something. Again, if the mind drifts, just notice it. Oh, there's my mind drifting. That's okay. Let me go back. Let me set an intention to open and allow and welcome information, guidance, healing. Group energy is very powerful. One of the reasons I love doing this course. We have lots and lots of people, and we can plug into that group intention. It's so much stronger. If your mind just said, oh no, all those people, I'll pick up their energy. I'm going to teach you how to not hold on to other people's energy as well. So take advantage of this moment. Maybe just trust you're safe. Feel your sits bones sitting on the chair or couch. Feel the air around you. In that air is spirit. Spirit is also within you, around you. Let yourself feel that. Let that energy guide you to something internal, something in need of attention, not something wrong, broken, or bad. But what is your soul, spirit asking you to look at? If you're getting emotional, just go with it. There's nothing wrong with emotions. We're born emotional. We need to embrace all of ourselves, including those parts that we were taught are wrong and bad. Keep them hidden. If you're being shown in anger that you haven't forgiven a certain person, notice it. Don't fight it. Anger is how we create boundaries. There's nothing wrong with anger. Sadness is how we heal loss. There's nothing wrong with it. And fear can keep you safe. Nothing wrong with that either. So when you see, sense, or are guided to a particular area, see if you can just allow it to be. Welcome it, embrace it. I'm just going to ask all of you to give yourselves a big hug in this moment. So, right hand, left shoulder, left hand, right shoulder. Honor yourself for showing up here. It's so easy to not show up here. It's so easy to listen to the mind that says, I don't want to listen to that guy or another shift course. Come on. Really, honor yourself. Give yourself kudos. You are here now. You're a divine being on divine purpose, dignity, and grace. And honor the journey you just went on. It was probably only just a few minutes. Some of you might have felt like a lot more, and some of you just the opposite. And embrace that too. Time is relative. We know this. Okay. Take notice of what you've experienced, even if you experience self acceptance for a millisecond. How different did that feel in your body than all the self criticism that we typically, permeate and extend and perpetuate with our own bodies experience and with life in general? This shouldn't be that way. That person shouldn't do that. That person shouldn't be running for president. Well, they are, right? And we have a choice. We have a choice in all these things. Do we fight it or do we accept it? And remember, accepting doesn't mean accept I give up. It means accept that it's there and it has a reason, and open to the next step. How can I better manage it? How can I make better decisions? How can I heal? How can I reconnect with spirit? How can I get my physical needs met? How can I get my emotional needs met? And how can I create my own new version of my own self that's spirit led and source and divinely guided? And if that doesn't get you excited, I mean, to me, that's like, sign me up now.
Well, the level of deep self-acceptance is just transmitting and emanating from you is really clearly sourced from the profound work you've done with these four original wounds. We haven't talked as much about why this is particularly important for empaths, intuitive, sensitives. Why is it that going to the depths of these four patterns is really important, particularly for people who are more sensitive?
Right. I think it's important for everyone, but sensitives and intuitives and empaths, we also pick up on other people's energy as well. So sometimes we're just not feeling good. We don't even know why. Well, you could be picking up on the collective, or maybe someone in your family is going through something. And in the course, we're going to talk about how to protect yourselves in a loving and aligned way. Very briefly, this kind of thing is not loving or aligned. This is fear-based. And this is putting yourself in a bubble, get away from me kind of energy. That's fighting what's trying to come your way. I
Hmm.
was shown different ways of working with that, that actually is more in alignment with the flow of life, that we can still be compassionate and loving and caring. It's one of the beauties of being empathic is we can really feel other people's stuff. But the non-beauty, right, the difficult part, the challenging part is if we take it on so much that it becomes our own pain.
Hmm.
A whole module is going to be at least dedicated to that, working with incoming energy, working with things that are not even yours to deal with, but may have been hindering your healing process for decades. And I've seen this. It's actually a very simple process. And sometimes even just a few minutes can make a really, really big difference. And again, if you improve even this much with a particular process, or it just makes sense that doing that more often, doing it consistently and in a group environment, especially, is even more powerful. So again, one of the reasons I love working with groups over 7 weeks or half a year or whatever it is, we get to know each other. There's connection, there's support. And the other thing is we learn and see really and reminded we're not alone. One of the biggest fears of people I work with, typically empaths, sensitives, and intuitives, is we're alone. No one gets us. And I totally get it. And I get you, right?
Hmm.
You're not alone. Source knows who you are. You're exactly who you need to be. You just need to take a couple of steps to open to what's available.
What a liberated, beautiful perspective you have. So let's talk more explicitly about the program that we've referenced a few times. So we're really blessed that Dave has come back and is going to be teaching this brand new program. It's called Healing the Four Original Wounds. Address your early abandonment trauma to achieve freedom, health, and belonging for empaths, sensitives, and intuitives. You can see it laid out in detail at the URL healingoriginalwounds.com, healingoriginalwounds.com. There's no previous background or inclination that's required for this. It's just if you're intuitively drawn, if you sense the truth in what he's sharing, the power of addressing these wounds, to relaxing in a deeper self-acceptance, and actually having a different way of engaging some of the sensitivities and that come with the terrain for people who are empaths, intuitives, and sensitives. So it's going to be a 7-week program. And Dave, I'd love for you to share a little bit some of your bigger intentions for the program and what people can expect to come away with. And then I'll read out the module titles so you can give us a preview of what's coming in each.
Sure. So, to the earlier point, we feel alone. In a course, you might not. In fact, my intention is that you no longer feel alone, that you feel connected to others in a safe way. Again, we'll talk about how to do that, but also connected to spirit, right? When we're really connected in those levels, we don't feel alone anymore. We recognize everyone's kind of in the same boat. It just shows up in different ways. So, my intention is to hold space for connection, for health, for vivacity, for clarity, for understanding who we are as individuals, who we are as a collective, and what can each of us bring to that collective and our own selves and our loved ones. And what does a healed you look like, right? You're going to very likely have some symptom reduction, potential elimination by following these steps. There's a little bit of work to do, of course. So I might ask you to do a couple of things between the sessions. You don't have to do it, of course, but you'll notice that you start feeling better. I think your intention will be to then increase doing those things. So my intention is to be open, present, and really acknowledge what the room needs versus what Dave wants to teach. Okay. And just, you know, give people what's needed and open to something beyond what the mind thinks it wants and needs.
Mm, beautiful. So module 1 is called What Are the Original Wounds and Why They're So Important for Peace of Mind and Your Life's Decisions.
Yeah, so we'll go over the original wound again and also be doing not just talking about these things, but taking you through exercises to begin to heal them. And I'll also be doing individual work. So one of the beauties of individual work is you can really see how the process works, and then we can do it as a group. And what I've also found is that when you're watching someone else heal, you get a healing also, right? You can join in the process or you can just kind of witness it. And knowing about these wounds to me is so important because it gives us a sense that there's a reason for what we're going through. And I'm not saying it's what you're going through isn't difficult. I know life is difficult. Life is hard. Life is messy. Life is challenging. Life is painful, but it's also blissful, wonderful, connecting. There's beauty everywhere if you decide to look. And having this understanding, giving you a deeper roadmap to healing, I think is vital, because if we're just addressing symptoms all day long, we might be doing that for the rest of our lives. So let's get into the causal levels together.
Module 2, healing the spiritual wound to satisfy your deepest longings.
Yeah, so we'll do some exercises here that will allow you to connect with that spiritual longing, with that, what I call source energy. You can call it what you will. It's fine. To me, that's a thing, right? It exists. It teaches me things that I, Dave, can't know. So I know something is going on, as much as my left brain would like something more tangible. But my heart, my feelings, my emotional body tells me there's something there. And when we can connect with that something, how would that not, begin to heal your deepest longings for that connection, right? So, so many wonderful things can happen when we open to that connection. That's another thing we'll go into more specifically. We often do chase that connection. And again, if that's your thing, great. But I think we know, even from our high school crush, whoever you chase tends to run the other way. Okay. And when someone chases you, you run the other way. Source doesn't run away, right? But the energy that you approach it with creates a different experience. So if you're running and running and chasing, it doesn't feel as organic, perhaps, as allowing. And it's allowing the soul path to emerge, allowing the challenges that are there to be there, understanding why they're there, and then reconnecting with that source energy. And from there, I mean, you can imagine, hopefully imagine, or not, maybe not. Maybe you can imagine, but just be open to having that blank filled in, connecting with spirit.
Module 3, specific healing for empaths and sensitives for pain relief, hope, awareness, and personal empowerment.
Yeah. So what I have noticed is that empaths, sensitives, intuitives have this whole other realm of healing that's necessary. In addition to what we did a very brief example of before about embracing what's there, when we're carrying someone else's energy, it actually has to be given back to them. And it's not done physically, obviously, it's done metaphysically. And there's processes for that. And there's also processes for protecting oneself against incoming energy. We're going to go in depth with that. That, for many people alone, is the X factor in the healing process, because if you're treating or addressing the symptoms of something that's not yours as if it is yours, it's kind of like using a screwdriver where you need a hammer, right? It's better than doing nothing, but it can make it a bit more painful, a bit longer in the process of healing. And I've seen so many amazing things happen when we do this returning energy to people. And it has to be done in this way, right? Or at least in my experience, right? I don't want to pontificate in that way. But if we're just kind of like, oh, just give it back to the universe, it knows what to do with it. I get that. And I get the desire for that. But this work to me is very different in that it's much more cause-based and it's about learning. Remember, symptoms are about teaching you something about yourself. So if the lesson is that you shouldn't be holding on to other people's energy any longer, going through the process, you feel lighter, less symptoms. Other people actually begin to feel more whole. I know it might sound a little bit weird, but we'll go into that in more depth in that module. And you begin that healing process that may not have ever been addressed in more traditional healing modalities. So it's a very holistic, very inclusive and conclusive process. And there's, again, different tools for different situations. So that module is going to be all about the absorption of energy from others, how to prevent it, and how to give back safely, lovingly, and compassionately what is no longer yours to carry.
Super helpful. Module 4 is called The Journey of Self-Discovery and Self-Creation for Empaths and Sensitives to cultivate more authenticity and meaningful relationships.
Yeah, we're going to practice surrendering and allowing ourselves to be informed. What does spirit want to manifest through us? And there's nothing wrong with manifesting from your mind. You may have gotten great things We've all seen The Secret. People get their dream houses by doing a vision board, and that's great. If that's your thing, I'm not here to put that down. But what I am here to point out is that a lot of times that need, want, or desire is coming from ego and or what we were taught would make us happy. And I think we all know, whether through our own experience or that of others, there are plenty of people who seem to have it all, but they just don't seem very happy. We're going to work with that and get really authentic with what our true desires are beyond the mind, beyond what we were taught, beyond what everyone else thinks is going to make us happy, and really just kind of tune in and say, okay, where do I need to go with this?
Great. Module 5, redefining and healing anxiety and depression.
Yeah, so we alluded to these a little bit before. By expanding our understanding of what these are, and they're prevalent, they're everywhere. And again, they're not wrong or bad. This is really important to remind ourselves. But through a redefinition and going through healing processes around these things more specifically, we can actually begin to lift the symptoms and potentially get off medication. Now, again, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't tell you to do that. But you might start feeling so good that you can then talk to your doctor and hopefully get the approval to go off the medication, or maybe just decrease it little bit by little bit. So again, listen to your doctor. They're there for a reason. And we're also going to work energetically and emotionally around these things, partly because, well, A, it's so effective, but one of the reasons it's so effective is we can't, Einstein said that famous line, I'm going to paraphrase, you can't heal a problem at the same level that created the problem. So you can't really outwit anxiety and depression. You can't out-reason it. It's like reasoning with a small child, an infant who has very little, if any, linear capacity, the pure energy and emotion. I'm going to go deeper into that, work in a way that's very effective for these diagnoses, but also for other things that might be related or seemingly not related, really getting again to that root, redefining it as an energy blockage, what it's really about, and working on that, I think a deeper level. And this is not anything against psychotherapy, of course. We do need to understand what things are about. There's, of course, a left brain linear aspect to all pain and illness as well. It's how we learn. We learn, oh, doing this has brought me this symptom. And again, it's not about blaming. It's about recognizing and honoring. I probably made that choice unconsciously. I didn't walk around saying, oh, I'm going to take everyone else's anxiety and depression from them. I'm not walking around saying, I'll take your fear, I'll take your grief, I'll take your anger. It's all subconscious. And we're also going to go deeper into why did we do that so we can stop doing that, and the energetic reasons and tools to begin healing it.
Module 6, illuminating and healing the shadow, particularly in empaths and sensitives, to clear blocks, activate full self-expression, and cultivate self-love.
Right. So the shadow is the name that's often given to fear, grief, and anger. These are the things that we were taught to keep in the dark. Maybe that's the reason why they're called shadow. But we know from in the physical world, if you turn light on, the shadow goes away. So as we illuminate these parts of self, as we understand them, as we embrace them, as we have compassion for those parts because they're really normal, they're needed, and they're vital for our human expression and to feel whole, right? We're going to work and do a little bit of shadow work there. So put your seatbelts on for that one.
Great. And finally, module 7 is going to focus in on healing abandonment.
Yes, this is going to bring together everything that we had done or will have done at the first 6 weeks, and really working on those abandonment wounds. They are so painful. Most of us don't want to acknowledge them, work with them, or even think that they might exist, right? It's like, oh, no, I don't have that. I'm here to offer the possibility that everyone has that. One of the reasons that high school crush that breaks up with you hurts so much is because they're actually triggering the abandonment wound from maybe 17, 18 years prior. One of the reasons things hurt so much when we're even 50 or 80 when there's a loss is because it's triggering that abandonment wound. And that doesn't make those events wrong or anything like that or not painful. It just raises the awareness, wow, this is actually showing me something within myself. So by really diving into the abandonment energies from a loving, compassionate place, we can be more whole, more connected. And I think the key word here is less attached. We become less attached to other people being certain ways. And how does that not seem more peaceful, right? So much of our frustrations with others is because they're doing things that we wouldn't actually do.
Hmm.
I would never do that. So I'm going to make that person wrong. And I'm going to blame that person for my problems. None of that's helpful, right? Go back to Don Miguel Ruiz, the four agreements, right? Take responsibility, right? Take responsibility for what is. And what I'm offering here is maybe an expanded, hopefully an expanded version of what is. And the invitation to dive into that in a supportive environment with a practitioner, with a bunch of other people that are also going through it, that are willing to work with these causative layers so they can really begin to heal those parts of themselves to then become more fully present, more unconditionally loving for themselves, for others, and for the planet.
Mhm. Beautiful. Well, it's a beautifully architected program, and I know that people are going to get so much benefit, and you're really dedicated as a teacher. So I'll share a few more other things about it. Again, the whole program is at healingoriginalwounds.com. So it's going to include the 7 90-minute live sessions with Dave, which is great to do the practices together, see experientials, work as a group, do breakout groups. You also get recordings for every session, both video and audio, as well as word for word transcripts. There'll be weekly exercises you can do at home. And there on the page, you'll see a number of extra bonuses designed to enhance your journey. There's a video conversation between Dave and Barry Goldstein, who's another Shift faculty member, called Sound Healing for Empaths, Sensitives, and Intuitives. Really fascinating terrain there, frontiers of sound healing. There's also a live online Q&A and experiential practice called Healing in Community, a group healing session. And this particularly high value with Dave, and you want to share a little bit about the group healing session you'll be leading for folks?
Sure. With the group healing, it's really interesting. It's just going in with only intention of being present. And we actually invite everyone there to really feel into their experience. A lot of times we go into an appointment with a practitioner or a group with a specific intention, and I'm not here to make those wrong. I'm here to invite people, and I'll take you through exercises to invite, is there something deeper that is being missed, right? Something that might be a bit uncomfortable to look at. So we kind of look over, oh, what's over there, right? So we go into the moment really deeply and we really ascertain what's going on in the room. And I do a bunch of one-on-one sessions. And what I found with that is there's always a resonance. Whatever someone's going through, something in you might also be lit up, or at least in most of you. I can't say for everyone, obviously. But that's one of the beauties, again, of the group work is you're watching someone else go through something, you're feeling something, you don't need to be on camera, right? Uh, and working very organically. What is the moment requesting in right now?
Mhm. That's a great extra bonus. And then there's one more bonus that folks get if you sign up today by midnight. And we like to do this as a little extra encouragement to tune in. And if you're getting the sense to move forward, and then you're going to get a special bonus for signing up today. This is a full ebook by Dave called Self-Care for the Self-Aware, a guide for highly sensitive people, empaths, intuitives, and healers. And Dave, you want to share a little bit about that ebook, Self-Care for the Self-Aware?
Sure. This was my first book about empaths, sensitives, intuitives. The one I had prior to that was more general, if you will. And it happened because I had a moment where I became aware of my empathic abilities. I was out and about at a friend's birthday party, and what I didn't know until I got there was that it was a bar crawl. And empaths shouldn't be in bar crawls. Okay.
No matter
Uh,
how healed you are, huh?
well, this is what led me to that, to being healed around it. Um, I got drunk without drinking anything. I mean, other than water the entire evening. I hadn't really drank since college, and this was probably 20 plus years later. So I recognized the feeling. I said, oh my God, I don't get this. How can I be drunk? And Spirit, in its infinite wisdom, showed me this is what it means to be an empath. I said, wow, I can't miss this signal. This is really clear on. I mean, I can't walk a straight line right now. Right. And from that moment on, my practice became one from typical medical intuition, which would be something like, okay, I have a back pain, and I would intuit, okay, you're angry at your father. We work with that, we heal, everything's great. Now I'm hearing intuitively, you're carrying your father's anger. you're carrying your mother's grief. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do with this? But again, opening up, intuiting, listening, steps to heal these things became really clear. And that's what that book was based on.
Mm.
And it's actually a really short book. There's a lot of wonderful information in there. And it was on Amazon's bestseller list for 41 consecutive months, which is practically unheard of for a self published book. So I know there's good information in there, and hopefully you'll read that and get something out of it.
That is quite amazing to have that endurance there. So that's the special bonus folks get when you sign up by midnight tonight Pacific time. So really going to be a beautiful program, a lot of healing, a lot of profound insights, and just a very deep atmosphere of self-acceptance. And we've kept the investment very accessible for the program. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to start June 26th, then run Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings, transcripts, and the community as well. And on the page, you'll see a lot of great testimonials from people who have taken previous programs or worked with Dave, different freer person now, encouraging tender teacher, dedication, knowledge, wisdom, and humor, made it transformational. Really great testimonials about just the depth of care, wisdom, and usefulness of the teaching. So you're in good hands. And if you choose to move forward, you'll also get that special self-care for the self-aware ebook when you sign up by midnight tonight at healingoriginalwounds.com. So, Dave, we're at the end of our time together. I feel like you just emanate such a deep self-acceptance and acceptance of all of us. Thank you for bringing your wisdom about how to do that, particularly in these deeper substrata of our psyche today, the original wounds. So, anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering diving into the full program with you?
Yeah, so a lot of what we're talking about is getting in touch with your inner truth, right? So, um, how does it feel to lean into the possibility of taking this course? Let your spirit guide you. It may not be for you, although I do think that everyone who takes this is going to get at least something very valuable. I took a seminar yesterday. It was 3 hours, and I got what I needed in the first 4 or 5 minutes. One sentence that just lit something up really brightly for me. So I think just showing up is a big part of it. Like Stephen might have mentioned, I don't recall specifically if you verbalized, but there's actually a money back guarantee. There's actually nothing to lose here. You show up, you don't like it at a certain point, you can get your money back. But I think you're going to appreciate it if you're resonating with even 20% of what we're talking about. I really believe you'll get something very powerful out of the course. Obviously, if you're resonating more, some of you are, I can feel it right now, just like your heart's lighting up. You're like, this is what I need. This is what I need. So go sign up now. Listen to your body. It's telling you something. Um, so I'll leave it at that. Okay.
Beautiful. I think that's a great message to come away with about that deeper self-trust of our own knowing. So thank you, Dave, for your wisdom and your deep presence. And thank you all for joining. If you'd like to go further, you can do so at healingoriginalwounds.com, and you'll get that special ebook, Self-Care for the Self-Aware, when you sign up by midnight. So thank you so much. Many blessings.